Today, South Korea marks precisely 1 year since its short-lived martial law declared by the former administration on December 3rd, 2024. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Wednesday, December 3rd here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. President Lee Jae Myung praised the public for transforming, quote, the darkest moment into one of our brightest, not via violence, but through dance and song. This particular praise came during a special statement earlier this morning to mark the first anniversary of South Korea's short-lived martial law in over 4 decades. For more on this, our freelance journalist Yang Chien-Hao here in the studio. Chien-Hao, it's been a long time. Welcome back.
A long time no see. Glad to be back here.
Right. I also have Steven Borowiec with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia. Steven, it's great to have you here.
Good to see you as always.
Chien-Hao, let's begin then with details of the special statement by President Lee Jae Myung earlier on this Wednesday morning.
So President Lee Jae Myung has spoken a lot today, but let me explain it to you briefly. He has regarded the citizens' protest as a way of defeating an unjust power through peaceful means. And he even mentioned that South Korean people have made themselves fully deserving the Nobel Peace Prize. And he said the government born from the Revolution of Light will designate it December 3rd as National Sovereignty Day to honor the great courage and actions of the South Korean people. And during the foreign press conference, there is a journalist, I remember it's from ABC from the United States, asking President Lee, recently we always like to put a K to specify or to show the difference of Koreans are doing K-pop, K-drama, K-beauty, and K-democracy was also being mentioned too. So she's asking President Lee, how will the president define the K-democracy? And President Lee replied that he does think that the K-democracy is very special, and he believes that this is an example of citizens expressing their demands collectively and ultimately realizing them peacefully. And he said that in the past, when we talk about collective action, people often associate it with arson, with destruction of buildings or institutions or actings of violence. However, South Korea, as we see, this country has avoided such unfortunate incidents, and instead they go onto the street and to demonstrate using the most direct means, direct ways to peacefully pursue their demands. Thus, he said it is a form of direct democracy.
Right, and staying with the press conference with members of the foreign media, Steven, you were there, of course. Before I ask you about your takeaways from that particular conference, what appears to have been the common factor, if you will, with regard to the questions extended to the president by the foreign media today, and what consistent message did the president seek to relay, do you think?
First, to answer the bit about the questions, I mean, I'm not sure there really was a common thread, just because you do get a sense of the diversity and the different interests in the foreign press corps when they get the chance to ask questions. And let me just say that this is like a quite unusual opportunity in that this was a press conference that was exclusively for the foreign press conferences. There were domestic reporters were not there, so it was like a smaller number of people who were there and more opportunities to ask things. So. Just what I meant about the regional proclivities is, you know, the Japanese reporters will get up and they will ask something about Korea-Japan relations, and then somebody from an American media outlet will get up and they will ask, their question is always something about Trump. And then, you know, maybe somebody from, you know, it's quite clear like what those people's editors are interested in, and, you know, what their idea of like what their audiences are interested in. But in terms of like the kind of through line for what Lee was trying to communicate, I mean, I think Chien-Hao got into a lot of this, and Sunny, you and some of in your intro, just that this was a quite scary and a quite ominous moment that we went through 1 year ago today. But Lee was really trying to drive home the message that this had a kind of positive legacy. And probably because he was speaking to an audience of foreign journalists, he was really trying to hammer home the idea that like this is something that could be a model for other parts of the world. You know, he at one point in Lee's remarks, he kind of addressed people in other countries, and he said like to the people in the world who are fighting in their own societies for democratic freedoms, like he encourages them to look to the example of Korea, which he thought was outstanding in a number of ways. And specifically what he said was that the Korean people, through their resistance to the martial law decision, were able to go through legal channels and were able to use popular pressure in a peaceful and a non-violent way. He's right about that, and like that's a great story, but I just think that in trying to kind of push this as a model for other countries to follow, I would just say that there are some challenges there, because Korea has the advantage of that it already is a democracy. It already has all the functioning institutions that a democracy has. It has a free press. It has a free legislature. It has like independent investigative agencies and all the rest. So Korea was a case 1 year ago today of a functioning democracy that had a kind of rogue and a poorly conceived attempt to overturn it and to suspend the functioning of all those institutions. And as we saw, it didn't go very well because the way that a democracy is supposed to work is that like one person or a very small number of people cannot suspend the functioning of the society. You know, power is dispersed and you have competing institutions that have checks and balances on each other. That's not the case everywhere. A lot of countries in the world where citizens are fighting for deeper and more meaningful rights, they are not operating in that kind of context. They do not have a free press. They do not have a kind of police force that will exercise the restraint in dealing with somebody who's protesting or somebody who's like openly showing dissent. So, I mean, I think Lee is sending a helpful message. He's sending a message of hope, a message of kind of solidarity with other places in the world. But we'll see if K-democracy ends up being the next hot South Korean export, as beauty and dramas and music have done.
Right, and staying with that then, Chien-Hao, what were some of your takeaways from the president's exchange with the foreign press earlier this morning?
I remember this summer on this show, I've mentioned that comparing with former President Yoon Suk Yeol, President Lee has shown much more sincerity in engaging with both domestic and foreign international media. Today, in addition to a press conference for local journalists, he also held a separate briefing for foreign correspondents, which me and Steven have attended, responding to each question in turn. In the past, when he was elected as the governor of Gyeonggi province, as I remember, I saw the live broadcast on TV. And South Korean anchorwoman raised a question about the corruption allegation against him. And during the live broadcast, Lee abruptly said that he couldn't hear the question, and he angrily took off his earphone and then ended the connection. As far as I know, he even told the reporter on the spot, saying that he didn't want to answer any related questions. But now we can see he has a clear change. And now President Lee is willing to take questions from both domestic and foreign correspondents, responding in a more friendlier and humorous manner without showing impatience. In fact, with just 6 months of taking office, he has already held over 3 press conferences for foreign journalists, as this is fairly frequent occurrence. But I still want to point out some problem that remains, remains a difference in the way that which foreign and domestic reporters are treated. For example, in the recent APEC summit in Gyeongju, the presidential office initially provided workspace and nominating seats for those domestic media correspondents, leaving foreign presidential correspondents without any designated area. And after repeated requests from the reporters, they eventually opened a new space for foreign press. But there were any power outlets at the seats, making it almost impossible for us to work. And there have also been cases where the presidential office informed the domestic reporters in advance about upcoming briefings and events by government officials, but completely left out the foreign press groups. This kind of I can say this discrimination makes us feel excluded, and it's something that needs to be improved in the future.
But the event today perhaps it was more inclusive then.
Right.
Because there was a separate press conference
Right.
with the foreign media. Right, something to think about, of course. Stephen, let's now touch upon the broader ripple effects of this country's short-lived martial law. What do you suppose has been the political repercussions of that event last year on December 3rd?
That's a big question, and it's probably something I could talk for a long time about. So feel free to tell me to be quiet if I'm going on too long. But I say there's different takes on that, and I think I lean towards the more optimistic side of things. I've been reading about this today and in recent days, and there's one take on this that this is a friend of mine, Arirang, published a column about this in the pages of Nikkei Asia, and part of her argument was, I hope I'm summarizing it correctly, was the martial law attempt and everything that connected with that is a kind of demonstration of the fragility of South Korean democracy, because it highlights how there are these competing networks in South Korean society and in the politics and in business and the investigative organs that are kind of inherently antagonistic and are competing for power and tend not to cooperate. And so it's, this kind of, the martial law attempt shows that the system can be disrupted at any moment, and the system is, has these, despite the kind of happy ending of the particular martial law case, the system has these flaws in it. And that's one way of looking at it, but I think if I was speaking as an analyst and not as a reporter, I think what I would say was, the precedent of the case is that this type of attempt to subvert democracy does not work, and it backfires very significantly. So if you look at what happened to Yoon, it was he tried to defy the democratic norms of the society, and he tried to, in a way that contravened law and contravened procedure and contravened norms, he tried to damage the democratic fabric of the country quite seriously, and it all blew up in his face. And it ended his term as president, and it looks like he will perhaps even lose his freedom for a very long time because of that. So I think I take the view that it shows that South Korean democracy has matured, because it proves that this is not a country where a number of brave but ill-intentioned people can execute a coup. It didn't work. And it was put down, and it was resisted using peaceful means and by working within the system. So I hope that the young people of this country, the people for whom this was kind of their first exposure to a big political conflagration like this. Their parents have seen this, their grandparents have all seen this, but for anybody who's younger than maybe my age or Chien-Hao's age, anybody younger than that had never lived through something like this themselves. So I hope that the lesson that they take from this is that this kind of era, this kind of violent or volatile era of South Korean politics is in the past, because the country has just kind of outgrown that. We are here 1 year later on December 3rd of this year, and we are living in what is still a functioning democracy, what is still a society where citizens enjoy full civil and political rights. And we got here by a safe and a fair and a free election that took place in June of this year. So like I said, I'm a bit more optimistic than most, and I think the repercussions, we're not out of the woods. There's still this trial that's dragging on, and South Korea does still have a political culture that is characterized by antagonism, and that does lead to administrative log jams, and it does lead to a kind of failure to address bread and butter political issues like housing and education and infrastructure and all the rest. But the lesson that I take from the events 1 year ago today is one of triumph over an ill-intentioned actor.
Right. Well, quite a number of pundits also said the particular event also further deepened the divide within the political arena. That being said, Chien-Hao, what can you tell us about the impact on society itself?
I've both cover the Park Geun-hye scandal in 2016 and the President Yoon Suk Yeol's martial law crisis last year. And I found there are very similar part when you doing interview on the street. They are very similar public mood. Many people, they told me that they felt ashamed for their president's actions and they feel regretted having voted for them. Recently, a well-known South Korean legal professor, Han In-seop from Seoul National University, he published a new book in Taiwan discussing this latest martial law crisis, and I have just written a review of the book today. What left a deep impression on me was that Professor Han's response to this kind of shame feeling by many Korean voters and citizens. President Han wrote that any country can produce a power-hungry, irrational leader like President Yoon Suk Yeol, but we should think about which country can return to normal in just 2.5 hours. In such a great crisis, South Korea has managed to avoid the use of guns, relying instead on citizens rushing to the scene in light clothing and members of the National Assembly. They literally risking their lives to climb over the wall and participate in the vote to lift the martial law, and thereby blocking the presidential decree within 2.5 hours, while people continue to take this to go on the streets and protest, having protests day by day in peaceful demonstration without any casualties. South Korea has seen for the second time, citizens, the people using their collective power, as I mentioned, to directly pressure the National Assembly and then the Constitutional Court to remove an unfit president from office. And of course, voters must carefully scrutinize whether candidates are truly qualified before casting their ballots. But Korean citizens have shown that once a president exposes serious problems, acts dishonestly, and fails to persuade the public to accept his explanations, there are democratic mechanisms and civic pressure capable of forcing that president to step down, to leave the office.
Which is something Steven was mentioning as well. And Steven, as you mentioned, the former Yoon Suk Yeol administration, it's facing legal consequences for its declaration of martial law last year. What's the latest on that front?
Well, there's a lot going on there. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if I can break down all the specific cases, but I believe that the most serious charge that Yoon is facing is that of insurrection, and that means like leading an attempt to overtake the country. I believe that carries the potential quite significant penalty of perhaps life in prison. And I know that there in the halls of the National Assembly and in the political circles nowadays, there's a lot of wrangling over the charges faced by some of the more high-profile members of the Yoon administration, such as former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo and former People Power Party floor leader Chu Kyung-ho. I know that the government the Democratic Party, the ruling party, is kind of going after them as key accomplices, whereas the People Power Party is kind of objecting to this, and they're calling this a witch hunt. It's the old story of one Korean administration takes power and they do everything they can to mete out the harshest possible punishments to the people who came before them for whatever they did. This is a kind of exceptional case because this is an administration that the Yoon administration ended because of this whole martial law case. And Lee, had some pretty strong words on these topics earlier today. He did say that he wants to create a country where he wants to punish the people who are responsible for this as strongly as possible, and he wants to create a country where nobody would even dream of calling martial law. There's different ways to interpret that. You could say that that's just like a fair and a just kind of response to what took place. You could also say that that kind of feeds into this retributive culture that a lot of people in the country are a little bit fatigued by. I think I remember seeing a poll earlier this year where a plurality of respondents refer to political conflict as the biggest problem in society. The fact that these two political parties are always at each other's throats and they're not working together as much as they could. So. This is in the legal system now. This will be up to the Yoon's fate, and the fate of those closest to him will be up to legal professionals to decide. But We just have to hope that it doesn't lead to, or it doesn't worsen this kind of culture of these cycles of antagonism.
Right, of course, of course. Chien-Hao, I believe we have time for just one more question. Could you remind us a bit about the events that unfolded on the night of December 3rd, 2024, during which I believe you were also on the ground covering that particular story?
We still have enough time? Yeah.
We have like about a minute left.
Okay, that was when I remember I just took a bath and I was doing hair drying, and I saw like on Facebook someone mentioned that President Yoon has declared martial law, and in the beginning I thought it was the fake news. Yeah, so I was like laughing, but later I turned on the television. All the terrestrial channels are suspended their shows, and they're having the breaking news broadcasting the President Yoon's declaration. And then I remember that Kelly Kesselis from Washington Post called me, Chien-Hao, should we go to the National Assembly together? And I said, why not? But I'm afraid because for Taiwan, as a Taiwanese, we have been experienced like martial law. Although after I was born, it's been lifted. But I still feel very worried if we, like, for example, if we take taxi and then if like police or the special forces block us, if they're gonna beat us, how could that be? What will we do? But later we didn't care about that much, because seeing that people are still like pouring in front of the National Assembly and having protests, so we decided to like taking taxi there. And then after we arrived, the National Assembly has already finished the vote, lifting the martial law. People, they are already having like their banners and their posters. And then I was lucky enough to go inside the National Assembly during that night, though that the special forces are all withdrawn. So people, like many like MPs, they are announcing that they are claiming that President Yoon's insurrection and it needs to be kicked out. So, and that has been the starting of my life of covering the news day by day, without sleeping. And then we see that President is being impeached and then being arrested. Yeah, lasting 6 months. Yeah, what a long period.
The political fallout was quite rapid.
Right.
Right, indeed. I'm afraid that's all the time we have, but that was a year ago. We are back. We have proven that Korea's democracy is resilient, if I may say so myself. All right, Chien-Hao, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. Steven, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, that is all the time we have today. We return same time tomorrow with more panel discussion. Join us then.